Islam is, in one sense, more straightforward than Christianity. It teaches, look, you can lie to infidels because they're infidels. You can use them in any way your power allows you to do. You can lie to them, but you mustn't do that to your own people. That's what Muhammad apparently taught and claimed it came from Allah. It's one way to live, and then you get a Muslim society where personal trust doesn't go very far. That's why they can't run big institutions, because you need big morals to run big institutions. That's what we're running up against in the Western world, and we're going to collapse because of it. The short supply is not going to be the how-to of technology, but the ethics of those who are in control. And as Tristan Harris points out on the two things of his I'd looked at so far, he said the problem is, even if I or my company recognizes that we shouldn't do this, that's going to affect our bottom line, because there are other people who are going to do it. So social media depends on clicks. Your clicks go down, your stock price goes down, your capacity to develop goes down. It's an intertwined mesh where, as Psalm 73 points out, why do the evil prosper and the people imagine vain things? To revert to the Messiah again. It's a big problem. And we don't know how to deal with it, because when you become a Christian, you don't immediately start living a good life, do you? The patterns that had developed before you became Christian come along slowly. One of the other books I'm reading at the moment is also like Tristan Harris, not able to engage one with the metaphysical, the moral world. But it's a man who worked for the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, writing about Africa. And it's a problem that I have faced in the micro. He's writing about it in the macro. But you don't become good quickly. And the Bible teaches that right from the start. I mean, it says quite clearly in Deuteronomy 4, 5, and 6 that God says, if you will keep these rules, then it will go well with you and your children forever. But if you fail to keep them, you will not flourish. Now, the judgment lasts for a little while. The love lasts forever. But a world that is not morally consequential is not a good world. But a world that is morally consequential doesn't change quickly. And all the money that's been pumped into Africa has not achieved very much. I have perhaps a little cynical streak, but on my first visit to Africa, I became aware that churches had in Africa, quite a lot of them they had people on staff who were in charge of development. Very interesting. That I'd never come across that, of course, where I grew up. And the interesting thing was the pastor rode a bicycle, but these guys usually had a Toyota. You know where the money came from. So the most successful financially are those who run the development programs. But that's corruption. The money wasn't given for them to be better off than anyone else. It was given to advance the good of all. But the bit of Africa we know well, along the shore of Lake Tanganyika on the Zairian side as it was then, DRC as it is now, they had the money from the European Union to build the road from Uriria south many times, but never got done. As the Africans put it, the money got eaten on the way. So when they started talking to me about development, I had to go away and think about it. That's where my interest in Deuteronomy started, there in Africa, because once I started teaching them that, they wanted more, because they could see that it had meaning, which singing happy songs didn't do. They were very good at happy songs, and dancing in church is quite exciting, but no teachers. That's critical. So once they discovered that I could teach scripture, they didn't want me wasting my time on patience. That's the way they saw it. That was a bit of a shock for me, but a good one. So this problem of no metaphysics is going to make it very difficult to deal with the obvious intrinsic problems involved with AI. And Tristan Harris is sort of intuitively aware of this, but not explicitly aware of it. John Lennox, however, goes about it a different way. I mean, he does it biblically, and you can find him online very easily. But he takes the prophetic approach that the Lord warns us that trouble is coming, but it's not permanent, and we're not to be afraid. We may not have a good time. He says from the beginning, you will be persecuted. This is not going to be a rose garden, but I will be with you all the way. So whatever comes, we can be certain that we will not be alone. That's what convinced the rest of the world that the story was true. Behold how these Christians love one another. Martyrdom was expected. In fact, the church had to teach people, you don't go looking for it. You be as prudent as you can be, but if it comes, accept it, and the Lord will be with you. And of course he was. And so the stories of the martyrs in the first centuries, they went round the Mediterranean. And so in a few centuries, the Western world was Christianized, largely because of what they had seen. These people love one another. They didn't practice infanticide. They even collected children dumped at the city gates and brought them up. If you love children in that kind of way, you will ultimately take over. If you're selfish, you're going to say, why would I have children? Then you set out to virtue signal, say, well, it'll be good for the environment. And then you follow that up by bringing people who will never be able to function in your own society at the level that you require and pretend that you're doing good. Whereas what you should be doing is taking them the help that they need at the moment. Like, think of all the money we've wasted on calling God's production of carbon dioxide a disaster, a pollutant. How much rubbish can you tolerate? Carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. It's got a feedback system. Now, at long last, they're beginning to recognize, I mean, good scientists have known forever from the beginning. Listen to Happer if you want, somebody you can't dismiss in the lab next to Einstein for many years, but he's a first-class scientist. But there are many out there. Once you start looking seriously and ask, what are the credentials of these people? What do they actually know? No serious scientist at the biochemical level can pretend that carbon chains aren't the normal fuel for every living creature. Yeah, CO2 goes up a bit, the earth gets greener, things grow, it's up and down, but it's not out of control. But we've wasted trillions of dollars on things that are pollutants. What are we going to do with all those solar panels? What are we going to do with all those windmills that make some difference, but not a consistent one? We would certainly have done better for Africa by using that money to set up a coal-based modern generation system so that they could have decent power across the whole of Africa. And that would probably have lowered the CO2 level, because at the moment, rural Africa cooks every food over an open fire, not the most efficient way to do things. And they slash and burn for their agriculture still in many places. But if they'd had access to a decent fuel system and a land registry, I would add, then you could, some sort of development would certainly happen. How it would happen, who knows? It depends on human ingenuity. But all those trillions of dollars have gone, wasted. That's the world we live in. So what John Lennox does beautifully is remind you what Scripture has to say about this period of history. And its fulfillment is not going to be the disaster that some of the high-tech people are saying, because God promises, I will bring you into a earth renewed. That's the one who made it all saying that's what's going to happen. And that should comfort you. He doesn't promise you an easy journey, but he does promise you a safe arrival. Now, I would go one direction a bit further in talking about AI, because to me it seems time and time again, most problems of the moral and behavioral type consist of getting the ordering of the goods wrong. The one we get wrong at the beginning is to pretend that the Jews didn't get something right and it was a gift. You ask Christians, how do the Ten Commandments start? How are they introduced? And very few can tell you what it says. And very few could probably tell you all 10 commandments. That's where we've got to. And in America, of course, you have the liberal elite saying you must remove the 10 commandments from halls of justice, from the courts. Many churches don't display. I would probably say that most churches don't display the 10 commandments. That's silly. It's historically silly. But what it begins with is, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. It doesn't begin with these negative rules. It begins with a reminder of what God has done. Now, God doesn't change his character between bringing them out of Egypt and the Ten Commandments. He says, no, he's still a God of love. And these rules will lead to your flourishing if you keep them. And of course, banking, which has been absolutely essential to the physical development of the Western world primarily, requires trust. And trust requires not physical constraints, but moral character. The Jews had to be trusted with banking for so long because they were the only people who didn't cheat, because they'd been told by God, yes, you may charge whatever interest rate the person who wants the money will be willing to pay you. You mustn't do that with your brother. But they were taught that you must keep your promises, which is the essence of banking. Now, Darwin couldn't teach that. Darwin teaches you do whatever you can get away with and look at what its advantage to your genes is. That's what evolution is doing to you. Well, there will be no banking system under that, and therefore no development. The story of development is amazing. It's sad in places, but it is what it is, and it certainly has made a material difference to the world, which is beyond belief. In my lifetime, my dad came home with £6 in his weekly wage packet when I first understood what that was. That's what we lived on. Now, beyond belief. And of course, we waste much of our money. Tom Sowell is the person to read, as I constantly reiterate. But most people don't bother to write a budget. They prefer to complain about their victimhood and then spend $80 a week on cosmetics. That's not acceptable. That's stupid. But that's where we've got to. So the 10 Divine Intolerances is what I like to call the 10 Commandments. When you are truly intolerant of these things, your world gets to be a better place. I mean, when Jesus teaches us the Lord's Prayer, hallowed be thy name is right there at the top. First, recognize your fatherhood in heaven. Then along comes, hallowed be thy name. If there's nothing holy in your life, nothing that everybody would be shocked by. I never heard a swear word in my home growing up. It was utterly not done. And it wasn't done in school either. Now you have swear words all over the place. That has consequences. It takes away the real meaning of what a promise should be, something you say and keep, and turns it into trivia. Hallowed be thy name defines a society that has some foundations to stand on. To that extent, the Muslims concerned that you have dishonored my prophet at least recognizes that if the story is true, then you can't say that about Muhammad. So if you can show that Muhammad was not a good man at all, which is now possible to demonstrate, from their own literature, from the hadiths, then their religion must be false. And it's quite clear that in that religion, Allah doesn't interact with his creatures. There's no equivalent to the love demonstrated on the cross. In Tom Holland's recognition that brought him to faith, that the cross is the central feature of the history of the Western world. That man on a cross with his arms outstretched to bring blessing to the world. Interesting, the cross, when Muslim women in particular learn about it, it moves them because there's nothing like it. There's nothing like this sacrificial love in the Islamic world. This last week, I came across a couple of examples of young women who discovered the Bible by accident and became Christian, reading it in secret, and in both cases, they had to run for their lives. One, nevertheless, goes back to where she's come from with a guard and in and out quickly because they want to kill her, because that's what they're told to do. If you leave Islam, the Quran is quite straightforward. Your life is forfeit. So we need a lot more history. We need a lot more serious reading, but we're not reading at all. Because screens destroy your capacity to read. I've decided, I did it this week, that I'm not going to watch a screen on Sunday in any way. You can wait till tomorrow. If it's really desperate, they'll get to me by telephone, where we probably would answer that still. But I'm not going to watch a screen. And Sunday was good. I read a lot. I got a bit disconnected from the world, so I forgot that it was Monday yesterday and thought it was Tuesday already. That was straightened out by me turning up for an appointment for which I was 24 hours early. Welcome to growing older. But amongst the things that happened, and I'm going to close with this, is I came across a beautiful piece of poetry. Modern. I love words well put together. This is by a man called Malcolm. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I would pronounce it Geet, but I don't know. And it's called Parable and Paradox. You can see it here. And he is an amazing poet. And he's done a whole series of poems on biblical verses, which is what this one is about. So this is his poem on John 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And I just think it's incredibly beautiful. Wherever someone knows that they are lost and cries for help to find the way back home and turns towards their Father's house at last, you are the way, before they know your name. Wherever someone searches for the truth and tests each easy answer in its turn, stressing the question, pressing to the pith, you are the truth they cannot yet discern. Yet seems to glimpse the gate beyond the grave. Sorry, I missed a line. Wherever someone sorrows after death, yet seems to glimpse the gate beyond the grave, the living spirit in the dying breath. You are the life within the life they love. You come to us before we ask or pray, till you become our life, our truth, our way. Have a good week.